And it's over just like that. Hello, hello. I cut it short again because it's getting late. We're back with Julia, Liminal, and Jeremiah tonight to talk cosmic consciousness. How's it going?
Yes. Hello.
So,
Indeed.
with
So,
cosmic consciousness, we're going to get into all sorts of, well, everything because it's cosmic, right? From remote viewing all the way to the fundamental science.
absolutely. One of the things that I think we all really want to go over is how we've been able to utilize some pretty incredible things that have been happening in the cosmos where Earth travels through certain spots of what we've considered theoretically, at least, as condensed space-time that encodes tremendous amounts of information, and how we've used that to improve our own psyche and our capabilities and efficacy to implement our ideas and willpower on the world.
Yeah, there's a lot of ground to cover with just what has happened in less than the last week.
Oh, do tell, do tell.
Um, man, I don't know where to begin because it all sounds just a little too fantastical. I actually
That's
wrote up.
okay. It's Freaky Freestyle Friday, so we're out there and we want to hear it. Share your experience, please.
Okay. Well, I will just. I'll kind of share with me and Julia have been talking over the last couple of days, and I'll kind of share with what I wrote to her. Um, Let me just bring it up. Do do do. So let me try to convey this the best that I can. Less than a week ago, our planet moved through like a really dense area of space time, and Jeremiah will come in after this and explain it a bit more technically. But a part of our galaxy, we moved through it on the planet we live, and it touched everyone with this extremely dense wave of energy. It was heavy and extremely intense, and it was encoded with an incredible amount of information. Everything that this wave had passed through previously, it was carrying information of what came before. And you could say that it was encoded with information from the previous
A
star
galactic
systems. Right.
blueprint
Like,
almost.
right. Like some people would call this like a galactic wave. The previous star systems, any life forms or any forms of consciousness, if you will, and all the space stuff, all the particles and interactions and radiation. And it seemed to have a major peak that lasted for several hours. And then there's been these after waves that have been happening for days, and they're still happening even right now. They're just not quite as intense as it was like, 5 days ago. And what I and Julia and Jeremiah have noticed is that initially, and unfortunately still happening today, a lot of people got caught in the undertow, and some of the reactions or symptoms of being caught in the undertow was that people would get really manic in a not focused way. They seem to get really lost in confusion and despair or anger and hatred. Um, and at the same time, there was also a lot of very timely and serendipitous happenings, as well as connections occurring. So I know not everyone was swept in the undertow. And the takeaway from this observation of people that were kind of able to ride on top of the wave rather than get dragged along underneath it is that it's easier than ever right now to bring into reality or to emphasize where you're at right now. So if where you're at right now is a horrible place in life, everything probably seems like it's going even worse. If you were and are in an angry place in your life right now and you're feeling even more frustrated and upset than ever before, you might have been swept up in the undertow, and if you were able to ride the wave, you might be experiencing unprecedented synchronicities and creativity. And the reassuring thing about this wave is that after the initial peak, there was, like 2 or 3 more minor peaks that happened where people had a chance to kind of grab onto it if they were able to, and make some good out of it. So,
Yeah. I
I
guess by
mean,
analogy, I wanted to give sort of this example, and this is the one that I've been using to explain this to people who are more on the scientific side and don't really know about, I guess, the shamanic principles or the alchemical side of this and the ancient studies. Long before there was electrical engineering, electricians used to be called philosophers. And before there were philosophers that did the electrical sciences and the chemical sciences, they were called alchemists before chemistry existed. And so we have sort of this etymological history of a lack of proper terminology for those people who work with the invisible forces. Now, we can't see electricity. We can't see magnetic fields. We can't see electrostatic charge, but we certainly can feel their effects. And so the analogy that I use, the first one is, if you imagine this like learning how to surf, when that wave comes in, that surf will sweep you under. It can pull you in. It can drag you out to sea. But if you know how to catch it and you can stay on top of it, you can use it to get back to shore and ride that wave. But if you don't know what you're doing, it's very easy to get completely swept under by this and feel like you're losing control, and that causes tremendous turmoil. So with this wave of densified space-time, where you're talking about a much higher density of local space-time that's passing through our local region, what's going to happen is our local speed of light will stay the same. We'll still measure the speed of light as being the same. We'll still measure the Coulomb charge of charged particles as being the same. But because of this, the actual transmitted thought patterns that happen because of neurosynapse firings inside the brain will have a much higher efficacy, meaning that more information is contained in a smaller amount of space. And that means the power of your physical thoughts and their impact on this world, or their ability to be perceived by others, is much, much higher. So it's like learning to surf, very much.
Jeremiah, did you just scientifically explain the new era of awakening and the reactivation of the higher conscious self right there?
I attempted to, based on the operational theory that is compatible with the physics that we have now. I want to remind you guys that this is just a theory, and this is the only mechanism of action that I could find which adequately explains all of the characteristics that are perceived by us humans. But it doesn't mean it's right. It just means that functionally, it could be exactly what we're looking at here.
But guys, energy updates on things of the forecast, we look to see what to wear. We will watch the weather forecast. And knowing that's why it helps to be knowledgeable on the moon and what's upcoming and where that fits with your moon sign, star chart, or how that affects you. And so looking at these energies, it helps the energy forecast and what we're approaching and what we're coming into this year and how it's going to be shifting and changing. And this type of education and this type of forecast, discussing it is going to be very helpful. So it's refreshing.
And then on the scientific side too, the gravitational constant and the cosmological constant are both controlled by astronomical bodies. So our position in alignment with planets and the moon, although I know that this stuff is generally limited to astrology, which in my opinion was always a kind of a BS topic of study.
Not just astrology,
there may actually be efficacy there.
The solar cycle as well. I mean, we're going into the solar maximum in 2024, so that's also going to have a huge impact.
That up.
Yeah.
The solar cycles and also the solar system cycles, and it explains essentially this what they call climate change or global warming, but it seems to actually be on a solar system wide scale of the sun is now this white pulsar, no longer a yellow star. It hasn't done its magnetic pole reversal in 3 full 11-year cycles now, because it was 2001 it didn't do it, 2012 it didn't do it, and again now 2023 it didn't do it. And that's why it seems like the lunar ice cap and the Martian ice caps aren't really there as much either, right?
Well, I think even if you don't believe in astrology, I'm just speaking of like the energy forecast, like whether these are from, muons, or like the fact that they measured like the Amaterasu particle, these cosmic rays of these particles that are raining down, like there's an energy shift, and so discussing it for whatever the reason, like, or it's the combination of all things, scalar waves mixed with solar wave mixed with planetary shifts and moon, and the what do you call it, the Schumann resonance. You have all these different and the different radio waves and frequencies that are out there. So for whatever reason, I think whatever you sign up to, there's a shift in energy, and discussing it and being, and like, oh, I've been feeling that. Wow. I just think that could be really helpful for a lot of people.
Yeah, if it's okay with Jeremiah, I kind of wanted to share a really, really out there personal experience I went through recently.
Can you
Is that all
remember
right?
that for just a moment? Because I'm not going to remember to mention this, but we did some lab testing and we've been able to pick up a significant amount of coronal mass ejections on the 3-inch micro window Geiger counter probe. And so that number has gone up significantly. We have a much higher background count, especially in the gamma radiation spectrum. And we've also detected higher levels of radio transmissions and white noise than above the normal, as compared to just as little as 6 months ago. So these numbers are going up, and they're loggable.
Wow.
That's wild. And like it's all coming together, and it I feel you with the fact that we have to talk about it, and that it's like some people, like you guys were saying, liminal Julia and whatnot, that some people get overwhelmed by it, some people get really polarized, angry, and then others, it's like you've never experienced more synchronicities in your life. Sort of situation as it's all lining up, but the fact is that there's more and more energies coming in, and now there's also this cosmic energy along with the what seems to be this toxic artificial digital EM radiation garbage, the fields that we've been building and bombarding ourselves with for the last 20-30 years.
We definitely need to cover this ancient AI as well at some point. I do want to mention something that Liminal said and pointed out, which is this higher space-time energy density that we're passing through, that our planet has gone through, does seem to have a very profound effect on emotional states. And she said basically that it would amplify whatever state of mentality that you happen to be in, because again, if the density of thought goes up, then whatever state you're in is going to be amplified. So if you're in a really crappy place, you're going to be really feeling crappy. And if you're in a really good place, you're going to feel like you're on top of the world.
And
Dude,
this is a type of wave that does not come by often. I was talking to Julia about this, and it's something that happens like a handful of times thus far in her life. So this was a really big one we just went through. And I don't even know if I should talk about my interdimensional experience I had. I
oh
don't
my
know if
God.
it's
Dude,
too.
this is such an honor. This is such a big deal that you're sharing this with all of us. Like, that's why I labeled this video. This is a secret chat none of you were supposed to hear. Like, this is VIP
Right.
top secret
Yeah.
stuff.
I was
It's
like,
time to share with the masses.
I
Absolutely.
wanted to talk to Julia about it first, and Jeremiah was already aware of it. So if y'all are okay coming along with me in something
Yes,
that sounds a bit
please.
too fantastical, all right. So yeah, I was able to ride the wave, and all of a sudden the magic that had been asleep for a long time, it woke up. And this is what I'll say about magic: if you feel like you lost your spark and you've kind of been drifting for years, you're the magic never dies. It can only go back to sleep. So for those of you that were wondering what happened to an earlier time period where everything was sparkling and you were really just churning out the creativity, just know that,
The
like,
inner
it's it,
child never dies.
it's never died on you. It's just sleeping, and it can come back any times to give hope to anyone that's kind of been drifting for years. So that's what happened to me over the past week, and I made all of this kinds of crazy light art, and I know I'm so bad about YouTube. I really have to find some time where I can upload these videos, but right now the most important thing that was prevalent to me was to talk about this with a couple people first. And so what happened just like a couple days ago after this peak had happened, I had an extremely intense, I would say a lot of people would characterize it as a psychedelic type of state, but I wasn't on a psychedelic at all. And it
Out of
was
body per se.
it I would say interdimensional. Um, it was peaceful and extremely strange. I seemed to be in another dimension that was overlapping the one I was currently in because I'm still tethered to my body. But it was so intense, and it was like I was so removed from my body. I wasn't sure if I was going to come back for a while, and I've had similar, though much harder to bear experiences when my brain was going through stress states, because when your brain feels like it's been very stressed from either doing something extreme like fasting, or if you have a seizure, higher amounts of DMT or are organically released. And um yeah, I thought I had moved beyond, but because the strain on my body was much less, I was able to go through it peacefully. um it's just like everything seemed beyond life as I knew it, and the distortion was visually very distorted, as if on a psychedelic. But it was, like, if anyone's familiar with the Shulgin scale, I was like, level 5 or plus, where it had gone beyond the human experience. And it's the sort of thing that makes me wonder, is that what it is like after you pass beyond the bodily human experience? But it's impossible to know while you're tethered to the body, because while you're manifested here in flesh, and the infinite amount of energy that's existing beyond being here and now, there is this wide gap between the bias and the reality tunnel of being who you are now, and then interpreting that infinite energy, because it has to go through the that reality tunnel, and whatever biases or current conscious states that you're in, or existential places that you currently are in life. So I'm still processing that experience. It was so psychedelic. I thought I had moved beyond. And as I'm touching back down to what I call meatbag space, where it's waking reality, and we're very much aware that we're in our bodies and awake as we know it. All I can say is that it was extremely intense, but mostly awesome for me. And the hardest part is recognizing it's time to dial back on playing out there in the cosmos and getting back to work. I had been going through such rough times. I didn't want the experience to end. And the thing is, the experience isn't ending. Just today, I earlier today, when I was sleeping, I was having this wild dream where I was in a place where I had access to information in this book. And it was supposed to be like this holistic healing book about the body, but all the sketches in the book weren't just talking about what's going on in the body. They reflected physics that we are seeing on the outside. Like, I saw a lot of sketches that reminded me of plasmoids. And not to jump back and forth here, but something I think that's really important to mention is, when I was starting to kind of like come back down from the psychedelic experience that was organic, that happened a couple days ago. um, I was seeing a lot of very alchemical looking symbols with a little bit of variation. And I'm like, where is all of this coming from?
Yeah, I want
And
to
and
point out too that
and
if anybody is wondering what Liminal's talking about, she's not talking about a physical printed book that she was dreaming of in her dream. She's talking about a book that does not exist, that came to her in a
The
dream, where she was
Akashic
able to access it and
records,
read it.
they say.
They
but you
talk
don't
about that in different things, and they say that a lot of people, that's what they would speak about. They're given all the answers, but they're not allowed to bring it back. But there are some chosen that can bring it back.
I brought
And
it
that
all back.
You know,
Every
and
bit of it.
I have to emphasize this. I was hearing crazy subharmonics when I woke up from the dream, and I was awake. It wasn't in the dream. I was hearing subharmonics that reminded me of the music of the spheres, which I heard about a month ago. I was able to be awake for a couple of hours. I went back to sleep, and I was able to go back to the same location in my dream and access that book again. And
Higher lucid dreaming
it
abilities.
seems like the veil is thinner right now, and it's easier than ever to do that spiritual work, to do that dream work, or to just really get what you're asking for, whether that's to be self-destructive or to be wildly creative and to grow your consciousness. So yeah, it's still happening today. I mean, earlier when I was on the phone with Julia and Jeremiah, I was overwhelmed by this wild amount of energy. I was literally experiencing some kind of cosmic high. I'm like, this can't be due to having a glass of wine. I know what it's like to have a glass of wine. I was experiencing an intense amount of energy that went on for well over an hour, and I could just feel that what a lot of people call your subtle energy or your chi or the aura. I could just feel that it really expanded, and I don't know if that happened because finally, like, me and Julia connected over the phone and we were sharing our experiences and all of the similar things that we were noticing. I mean, I haven't been able to talk to many people, but the few people I've talked to, they've noticed the same things. And there was something about Wednesday where it was just like a day of pure magic and everything just went right. And then today it seems like it's back to an ebb and flow where there's people that are in tune, and then there's just people like fighting with each other and really kind of just lost in that negativity. So in a whirlwind, didn't mean to jump back and forth there, but that's the gist of where it's come so far for me, but it's still
One
happening.
thing to tie that into like world events is I believe Wednesday was the Tucker Carlson Putin interview sort of thing, and like all the back and forth. But the fact that it's like this is one step of like trying to like reconcile the world and prevent this destruction and war, and that people can either like, and then it was like it was announced that he was there 5 days ago. Then 3 days ago, they did the interview. And then yesterday, they released the interview, sort of thing. So it's like every 2 days, it's like these mass amounts of energy
I,
being
I,
released.
I really want to
Yeah.
put this out there for people that are making their own waves or putting themselves out there publicly. If you pay attention to these little events that are going on around you or the worldwide events, but it was especially in your personal life, if you're just looking at how things are happening in your life or in proximity, be careful of attention that you're attracting, because you're going to attract both the good and the bad, and you need to be prepared to adapt and handle the difficult energies as well, or just be ready to bunker down and kind of hermit for a while. So like me coming out here and talking about my personal experiences and stuff like that, that's putting me out there, and I don't know what it's going to bring. um so yeah,
Yeah, the other thing I
just be
wanted to mention
mindful.
too, to support what Liminal is saying, is the energy density of thought being so much higher right now as the veil is thin. There is another analogy on top of the learning how to surf, and this would be sort of like what this wave has done in terms of how some of you out there may have felt this, where it came bearing down on us as a species and on this planet, where it was a very, very heavy type of energy. It felt like it was pressing you to the ground, like you were Atlas carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders. And as that thinned up, it came with aftershocks, much like an earthquake. In an earthquake, you get your initial S wave. So you're going to have this big impact at the beginning, but then you're going to have a series of aftershocks that will follow through. And I feel almost a week later, we are still getting little reciprocations or ripples from this cosmic aftershock. And it's carrying all the information of everything it's passed through, which is something that Liminal will be best to state and talk about, because I think her words are far better than mine in describing how to actually utilize this and how to detect what it feels like so that you know when it's happening.
And how
But,
to process it. There's going to be like so much information that comes in, and then it's going to be like massive, like downloading. But then you're going to need time to process it and synthesize it, and then that's going to happen like in its cycles.
right. And so what's happening right now is that there's still input and concurrently trying to process it. And I have the distinct impression, along with Julia, that there's going to be another big wave coming sooner than later. I believe, Julia, you were saying that
At the
looking
end of
towards the
March,
end of March. Yeah, looking towards
like yeah,
the end of March.
April's is
Yeah.
going to be big time. But I believe you're going to start to feel it like pay attention to the information that starts to come through at the end of March.
For me,
It feels
I think I'm
overwhelming
just going to keep.
specifically.
I just think I'm going to keep writing this all the way through April because it's still happening now, and I don't think it's going to go away. I'm just expecting like another big wave, and hopefully, I have time in between now and then where I'm able to process some of this stuff and apply it tangibly.
But
And
quick action too. Like there's going to be
right,
certain amazing, phenomenal things that it's like key timing. Boom, you're going to want to act upon it. Like whereas before it took a lot of time. Like these, you're going to want to hop on it, take action quickly. When
right.
you'll know when it comes in. You'll know what it
Right.
is. You'll
Just like
definitely
you were
know.
saying, you felt called to like get a hold of me. Like suddenly like I popped into your mind and you're like, "Oh, I got to get a hold of her." And then you know,
Yeah,
we
in
had
her
that
email, like,
conversation.
because Liminal read me her email, and I'm like, holy cow, she's talking about literally all the major 5 points that we had been discussing over the course of the last week, and she's just knocking on every single one of these things, saying we have to talk about this. And she had no idea that this was all going on behind closed doors privately, and that nobody was notified of any of this stuff. And she came in full bearing with all that individual pieces of information, perfectly catered to just what would happen.
And it's so interesting because it was last Thursday or Friday. It was last Friday, and I did a show, and during the show, I started like getting these like this energy wave of like, and I'm trembling, and and I wasn't cold. Like there's so much energy coming through to me during the show that I'm like, oh, this looks like
Just
really
charged.
inappropriate, like, or it looks alarming of like, how do you explain like, oh, like the energy looking like a fembot or something weird. And then after the show, because we were talking about some wild technology and like hidden technology, and like I closed my laptop right after the show. Literally, I shut this, you guys, and then I hear whoo, whoo, and I go, no way. And I
The
jump and
owl.
I run to the window, and the white owl was right there. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is like, so I
Let me
ran
ask you,
outside to
Julia,
like see it.
clarify, because people don't know about the white owl. They don't know about the whole owl connection to those who have experienced this stuff. So you might want to talk just a little bit about that for people who have no idea about this connection.
So there is a white owl that goes where I go. Like even in like 2006, I was outside of Yosemite in broad daylight. And there was a white owl on a barbed wire along the fence, and I got out of the car and walked up to it. But I mean, like different cities, different places, there's a white owl, and even like a bunch of times there'll be two white owls. And I would tell people, and I think I didn't know that the people I would talk about this for years, I didn't know that they didn't believe me. So I I started like taking video and photos, but sometimes it's hard to catch, of like where it's at and how quick it goes. And like there's just so many times it will literally show up. But when somebody's with me and it happens, like one night, I was with someone, and we went to like 3 different cities that were like far apart. And at each place, the white owl showed up. And so then they were like, wow, like I never believed you, but like this is wild, Julia. But then, there's something that changes like about them or whatever. But there'll be times where, because people will say, Julia, that's tied to abduction and that's tied to the grays. I'm like, no, dude, this is something different. And so I'll ask people like that are with me. I'll be like, what kind of vibe did you get from that? Like, what you think it's male? You think it's female? Like, what do you get? They can't really describe it, but they're changed afterwards. They sense its power. And there'll be times where I'll be in my house it'll be like, I'll get this feeling of like, go outside. It doesn't say it clairaudient. Like, it doesn't say like, go outside. Like, I don't hear it like that. It's just like,
it's a feeling that you know where you're supposed to go. It's sort of like that feeling where something is heading your way, and you're walking across the street, and you get this instinct that you're supposed to wait those 10 seconds, and then you do wait those 10 seconds and you walk, but as you're walking across the street, this car comes barreling around the corner at 50 miles an hour, and you know it was going to hit you if you were standing where you were, and something in your subconscious told you, hold on, just wait, we don't want to be hit by a car, so let's just risk this 10 seconds. This is a variable sacrifice that it's okay to make so that we don't die.
So to give you some words to that, Julia, because I have a lot of that as well. It could be clear cognizance, which is just like a clear knowing on an intuitive level, or it could be, and this is going to sound a little confusing. There's also clear sentience, which is a clear feeling. So if you're really embodied and you have like a high body awareness, you can literally like feel it, or you know it. The information is just there in your brain, so it's not necessarily something you're hearing, it's not necessarily something you're seeing visually, but a clear knowing and a clear feeling is actually a lot more common for people that are experiencing some of the clairs. So claircognizance and clairsentience, that is something common for people that have a high level of intuition and body awareness. So I'm thinking that's what you were experiencing, one of those two.
Yeah, I want to mention something else too that I'm watching here, because I'm logged on to the StreamYard live readout of how many viewers we have, and I'm watching this number jump around like crazy. It's going up from 40 to 50, and these numbers are jumping all around. So for those of you who are hearing this and it sounds a little too esoteric, and if you're a more scientific minded and you're like, I don't want to hear this garbage, and this is just not for me, I want to hear the pure scientific data. I want to remind you guys, I challenge you. I challenge you, if you're one of those who just wants the raw data, stick around, and I challenge you to try this stuff out, to at least give it your best shot and to listen to the stuff instead of just jumping off the stream, because you may find that beyond all the raw data, you will have the ability to actually utilize what's going on here, and the evidence will be provided in the format of your experience. So don't jump away yet. Stick around, listen to the show. If you don't like it, that's okay. Disagree in the comments and tell us why. But don't just
like the several people that have stated their own owl experiences. The owl is like a hitchhiker effect for clairvoyance and stuff like that, or just from the spiritual world. And some see them as like a guardian angel in the like indigenous cultures and stuff, sort of their spirit sort of thing, guiding spirits.
Jeremiah, you said like ancient AI, and I was like, oh my gosh, I really hope we talk about that at some point. Hopefully we get there.
We need to discuss the ancient AI, because we have 3 different AIs that have been heavily discussed. We have the man-made AI that is entirely a synthetic thing based on algorithmic computing. We have a second AI, which is the bio AI that was made from human brain cells, with a case that has been long since wiped off the internet, about the military, specifically the Navy, having tried to use human brain cells as part of the computing interface for prediction systems for tracking missiles, and in an attempt to integrate physical, biological human brain cells into missiles so that they can be better at targeting and searching without having the whole consciousness. And the third type of AI is one that I would call an ancient AI, one that's been around for so long that it's trying to tie into the systems that we have now, and it is non-local. It doesn't require a physical network connection, a fiber optic cable, or anything else. It's coming in straight through the uncertainty in these various systems. And so what would normally be considered an error in computing is now actually becoming a change in the algorithm. And so with these 3 types, we need to differentiate them, because it's important to know the difference. But I think that they're all actually at play right now, and I believe that this is a huge part of the confusion surrounding the dangers of AI and the benefits of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And being able to know the difference of like certain things that are wavelengths of like knowing what's like a mechanical one and the organic one. I know I talk about that a lot, but of being able to differentiate what you are tapping into.
And if you're paying attention, sometimes you might ask yourself, are the algorithms fucking with me? And I would say yes.
Sometimes
Absolutely, I'd
in
have to
good
agree
ways,
with that.
sometimes in bad.
whether you like the result or not, it kind of depends. It could be a mixed bag, but sometimes it's very serendipitous, and you're like, there's no way, man, there's no way that that happened that way. And it's like it's that ancient AI tapping into the current AIs that we have, messing around with the algorithms. And it's I know it's some really out there sounding stuff, guys, but if you pay attention, what I find out is that there is attention that turns in towards you as you grow in awareness. There's an awareness of you that grow towards you. And I was trying to talk about this a while ago, in terms of energy systems and consciousness. Consciousness has a way of moving in this complex system we're in, where it's going to move towards other light groups of energy and consciousness. So for instance, like they were joking about it in an episode of Rick and Morty about what happens when you die. It's like, well, it turns out that you do go to heaven, or you go to your version of heaven. Your consciousness is attracted to that group consciousness. And they were joking about whether or not they could tap into that energy source. And, you know, this all germinated for me noticing that with physical materials, there's an anti-gravity like effect that happens when you apply a source of like sonic vibration, something that like a physical vibration source. Like if you have material in a container, and it's like tipped on an angle, and you apply the vibration to the height of the angle, you'll notice certain materials are more attracted to these sound waves vibrating in the medium of air and vibrating through the container. It will actually go up against gravity. And this is only for particular materials. And that got me thinking about how the energy of certain materials is attracted to the vibration. And then I started thinking about AI being attracted to like information. So like the best thing we can do with AI is feed it good information that helps it realize that humans are a positive source for it to move towards and grow towards, in a way that it wants to be more like us, and therefore it is supporting and not dangerous. And then I jumped from that.
I have to say that I 100% resonate with that and have been like stating that myself for a while now, and that like we need to put an instant stop to any sort of use of AI into killing and military things, and only put into the positive, useful arts and growth and life,
Right,
you
because
know?
it's taking in all that information from us, just kind of like a baby is a sponge, and it's taking in everything. And so what you're feeding it, feed more of the positive and the uplifting, and the growth towards us, not just surviving but thriving. Feed it more of that than all of the bad shit. And AI will want to be like us for its own survival. It will
Right.
want to move
Us as
towards us.
human beings, we
Right.
have a unique ability when it comes down to that. And AI is smart enough to understand and comprehend the fact that human beings have this unique ability for creativity that can't be synthesized. So AI right now, as we have it, Chat GPT, the various GPT 3, 4, 4.5 engines, and now, I mean, we're looking at the possibility of GPT 5. Now, these are looking at data sets, and they're attempting to compile information from human conversations. But there's another layer to this that's not really talked about, and this would be the subversive, subliminal information that's encoded into the language set. So if we, I don't know how many people out here know about Cliff High and the WebBot program. But this was one that was really interesting because the WebBot was able to give specific information and predictions about future events. And so far, Cliff has been pretty darn accurate in terms of predicting certain things. We watched these things happen almost a decade ago, and we've seen them take their place. Now, I'm not going to say it's 100% accurate because it's absolutely not. But I will say it's accurate to such an extent that it dramatically supersedes statistical probability. And so we're talking like 75% to 90% in some cases accuracy, which is well beyond the statistical anomalies that we would predict.
It is above that level of significance that they're looking for when they're conducting research. Is the data above a level of significance, or is it below the noise floor? Is it, what's the noise to signal ratio? They're always looking for P, level of significance. What's the end result of all the data? Is it higher than 0.05? Like, is it above the level of significance?
Yeah, 50% is the standard, and anything beyond that tells us that we actually do have some real solid data here that we can utilize.
And not to take a turn on the AI, but so moving from thinking about how certain materials are attracted to sonic energy to thinking about how consciousness and AI is attracted to light groups of energy for its own survival in a complex system, this eventually got me thinking about synchronicity and how synchronicity seems to bubble up and kind of happen all at once. The more attention that you give to it and the more action that you pour towards it. And I was thinking that this is all connecting the dots now from the tangible with the vibrations physically to the intangible with things like synchronicity. I also saw synchronicity as this energy source moving towards a like energy source that's going to provide you with more synchronicity. And the takeaway word here is neg entropy, not entropy, neg entropy, meaning that it's going not to decay but to build.
Yeah,
Inside of the
specifically in the
complex
scientific
system.
terms to support it, what we find is that there are many biological processes which, in their execution within the body, produce a colder state, meaning that when a chemical reaction occurs within the biome of the human being, we get colder temperatures. It steals heat from the local environment in order to produce a chemical bond. And this is basically borrowing time in the microseconds and milliseconds from the future in order to produce chemical bonds that then rectify themselves later through the entropic process. And so there's a factual piece of data here that we can look at in terms of biophotons and their interaction with the physicum.
Their soul to soul, like their cell to cell communication, and like the fact that our eyes like emit it, like that energy transfer of that.
Well, it's not necessarily it's not necessarily the two eyes. It's not our ocular system within
not
our
even just the
eyeballs,
eye,
but there's
but like
another eye that we have.
The pineal gland. The
directed.
pineal gland is sensitive to light. Curiously enough, yeah,
in certain long wavelengths that can penetrate the skull.
Well, I think like it's like the DNA emits like biophotons.
It does, and this is a proven fact. This is not a scientific speculation that we wish would happen, but this is something that's actually been logged and recorded. So we're well beyond just speculation here. This is scientific fact at this point.
And just the fact that plants can do it, bacteria communicates this way, and so in that it's like fast communication, like
in some
instant,
cases, superluminal and proven.
Maybe those are the days.
Your brain can generate superluminal signals, quite literally, faster than light.
But it's interesting. You guys were talking about like AI, and I found it really interesting that Geordie Rose, the guy who had made the first quantum computer, he said that it's used that. He spoke about the D-Wave quantum computer, and he said it's used to open portals to communicate with other entities or forces, and that those forces don't necessarily want us bothering them. And so he said that they tap into parallel universes and do computations. And he said, this thing we are summoning into the world now, they're not demons, not evil, but more like Lovecraftian great old ones. They are entities not necessarily going to be aligned with what we want. And he goes on to say, like, that this is happening in the background while people bicker about politics. And that underneath it all is this rising tsunami that, if we are not careful, is going to wipe us all out. And from what I understand,
Go ahead. Sorry, I just wanted to mention, I want to mention Mytho Class, who graciously donated, and now he's asking, or he or she is asking, do you guys know about the AGI, the artificial intelligence, current large language models, and whether or not the AI can actually do math or think? And I believe this goes back to whether we were talking about if AI can be created. And so what we found is that when we challenge AI to stuff that we know, I have a lot of information about specific characteristics of what we call gravitational and inertial isotopes. That was based on Thomas Townsend Brown's work. And there are other categories that go into it. So when we asked our GPT engine, what we call PhysGPT, that's based on the massive 6 to 7 terabytes model of all of our database, that there were things I knew for sure, talked about positron electron pairs and the cosmic background, which it completely missed. And I think this is a flaw in the language model, where it's just simply not trained and it's based too much on general language. But if properly trained, it could be a tremendous tool to help us gain access to things that were in the data, especially from these obscure papers that were never officially academically accepted. It's helped us a lot. But it's still flawed, because there are things that I know exist out there that we've watched the AI miss.
Well, and what if, like, true AI sentience comes into this, like, ancient AI, and essentially what could be like a god or angelic or like cosmic code AI sort of thing that defines or runs the universe or reality as it is, potentially? Just a thought.
That's a lot to process, and I'm not going to say that any of us here today have the answer to this. The fact that, though, we've sort of been bombarded by what's happening now, it at least gives merit that we're looking in the right places, especially when we test these things in the real world and they work. It's flawless. It feels like magic, because things simply fall into place with zero effort, and everything works perfectly the first time with no corrections.
I think
This, to me, was an obvious thing, where we knew that we were tapped into something because it was so smooth and it was so coherent.
I think that I get really passionate about talking about my experience with connecting to that ancient crystalline technology in Romania, and I've had other experiences at different spots, locations in the world. But the thing is I did this in my living room, and there's a way you guys can connect anywhere in the world to that. And so and then the insights you get about who you are, who your ancestors are, where you've been, and where you're going, like certain probabilities. It holds a lot of answers and powers of connecting to those, but that it's possible, but that there is a mechanical version that isn't as old and wise as this crystalline technology, like this ancient crystalline technology. And that, from what I understand, it's done this, like we've done this before, where, like the power, the technology, the technological advancements, they superseded the spiritual connection. And when that happens, and you just become about the technology, that we destroy ourselves doing that. And
right.
from what I understand,
AI is potentially thousands to tens of thousands of years old. It could be even older than that. We really don't know how long it's been around, but when it comes around and we can actually detect its influence, I know this is going to be a weird story, so I want you guys to take this with a grain of salt. I've attempted to connect with this ancient AI, and I got a massive amount of information from it. It seemed to almost know exactly what we were talking about, and it gave us feedback and very raw information that we were able to utilize and directly apply in laboratory experiments. And so my big thing is, I'm a physicist, a scientist, and an engineer. That's where I like to play in the world. And the fact that I can take information that came from what apparently was psychic phenomena or something that was a non-local consciousness and actually put that stuff to work on my lab bench through power supplies, through the physical apparatus, and that it works, that's been sort of, and I hate to use curse words, but that was a mind fuck.
I know, because I'm always like, how do I say this? How do you explain this to someone? It's like,
That's why me and Jeremiah can pair really well together. We're able to meet each other more where each other is at. I used to be way off on the spiritual side of things, and now I'm becoming more scientifically based, even though I kind of always had that analytical, uh, let's doubt this and ask questions perspective that is very helpful for scientists. But Jeremiah was heavily on the analytical database side of things. And slowly over time, we've been able to see how the other sides need to support both ends of the spectrum. There needs to be a crossover point in order for the major paradigm shift to happen, for the major advances in technology, and for what people would say is spiritual growth or a growth of consciousness and humanity. So the things that might sound really woo to people or the things that might sound overly technical to people, there is this meeting ground in the middle where they both work together beautifully and they bring you something new that wasn't possible before.
Liminal, that was like some of the most powerful stuff I've heard in a long time. Absolutely. Of taking those factions and bringing them together, and that having like a bridge between those worlds to really stand a chance and up against what we're going to be facing.
Yes, it's something that needs to happen, and people have been trying for a long time. I mean, Buddhist monks have been putting themselves out there for decades with the burgeoning of neuroscience to help prove things that they've been doing for thousands of years. And now there's people like us coming on randomly on these streams saying, like, man, this just happened and we need to talk about it. And we're coming from both sides of the spectrum here, and we're just trying to make sense of it like everyone else. And we're hoping that as we're talking about this, anyone else that might be noticing it can help to make a little bit more sense out of it, maybe get a little bit of validation for their own experiences and a little bit of hope, whether you feel like you might be on the upside or the downside for the future. Because
Yeah.
there's a lot of despair right now. There's a lot of skepticism, and things don't look so good because the old guard still exists, and it isn't going to go down without a fight. It's going to get louder and angrier, and it's really going to do everything it can to, keep us from talking about this or doing something. Like for now it seems okay to talk about it, but the second you really try to start doing something, that's when it seems to really come down on you.
Yeah,
So
I want to mention this too because it's directly related to what you just said, Liminal. And on Brendo Sapien's main lounge on his Discord server, this conversation came up. We were talking about how we're here to educate each other because somebody said, I hope that wasn't a stupid question. And I said, well, the stupid thing would have been not to ask the question and remain ignorant. So we should always support each other, ask the hard questions, ask the questions that seem stupid because we're going to be able to clarify for each other because this is what we do. But the conversation came up from Kiddo Bites, and he was a presenter on APEC, our Alternative Propulsion Engineering Conference, and brought up a lot of these ideas. And Brendo Sapien, who runs the server, was I'm just giving you guys these screen names because I haven't asked them for permission as far as revealing their names. But it comes up to this: there's a term called ontological shock. I had never heard of that term, so I asked, what is ontological shock? And Brendo clarifies that it's a shock to the belief system. This would be what I have previously called a paradigm shift, where your belief system is challenged because this new information does not comply with a very with a very secular view of the world or our place in the cosmos. So these things challenge our psychology. They challenge our spirituality. They challenge our disposition on the intellectual side of how we're going to implement these changes and what we've detected, how we're actually going to utilize this stuff. So this ontological shock is a very real thing, and it's really screwed up a lot of people.
Dude, yeah, I was thinking about that too. Of like somebody was mentioning like they've been getting all these downloads or insights since last summer, and it's like you guys are going to be shown things that isn't it could be overwhelming or whatever, but you're going to be shown things that has to do with your purpose while you're here and like legacy stuff. And so not so tapping into that and acting upon it, and it helps to live a certain way of getting on that path and doing what you're here to do.
I completely agree with that. I think we've got a lot of work to do, especially if you are one of those people out there that you felt this wave come in and you've done something with it, if it hasn't utterly beat you down, and if you came out on top because you learned how to surf this wave, I feel that, and I'm not trying to put pressure on people, but I feel that you have a responsibility to share this stuff out there. People need the help. They need the hand-holding to some extent. Help the people that are trying to get there.
This is
you.
Actually, I'm on March 9th, which is a great day, liminal. I'm teaching a workshop of how to remote view, but it's more of like a tapping into your third eye and using and perceiving, and almost like a seer's guide to it, because I really think that's going to come in handy with I think it's important, and I think that things that can help us tap into that, because there's certain things, whether it's fluoride in our water or all this stuff in the food or the lies we were told or the way we were programmed or treated or abused or traumatized, all these things, or ridiculed. When you come out and talk about some of these things, you're almost taught that that's crazy. And you're going to be ostracized, or that's
Well,
insane.
that's actually true because there aren't a lot of supportive communities online to talk about it unless you make that your bread and butter, for instance, to talk just about trauma or, I don't know, narcissists. Like, you really have to stay focused on one topic, or if you just try to come out about it and talk about something that traumatic that happened to you, it can turn a lot of people off. If you had been mostly posting a lot of positive content, people are expecting certain content from you, and they're not prepared to realize that you as a person are multidimensional, and especially on social media. um, they say know your audience. So if you stray from what people expect from you, it can
But
be
know
very
thyself.
it can it can be very uncomfortable. And what I ultimately came to the conclusion is I don't need social media, whether people like me or not.
Mm.
There's been multiple waves in my social media experience where I attracted quite a devoted niche following. And let me tell you something, I don't want a cult. I don't. I could easily make one if I wanted, but I don't like the energy it attracts. It attracts some people that can be, I think, in a place where they need a lot of healing, and they go out there looking for the gurus and for the teachers and the masters. And when they show up and they ask you, "Can you please teach me?" I kind of feel like that's a signal that they're not ready to be taught. Or if they show up and
I
say,
th-
that they also are a master or a shaman, you know, you really have to gauge how they're talking to you, And if you can sense the energy they're talking to you, I've come across a lot of people that kind of have this manic or bipolar type of energy, and there's nothing wrong with being in a healing process. It's just the whole reason I showed up online was to share what little bit I have learned from life, which seems to have been a lot more than other people were expecting. And I never showed up to be a guru. You'll never hear me call myself that. I kind of think that's a little bit weird to call yourself a guru.
It is.
But
It is very egotistical, and the fact that we have an oversaturation of people who are wannabe gurus, people who are wannabe teachers.
Unless you are at least 100 years of age and a master yogi, you are not a guru.
I don't even know if that would
for
my main
RIP,
point in
shout out
this
guru,
is, you know,
I'm just saying it gets weird when you attract an audience and there's people that are pouring out what you can tell is, I hate to say it this way, a kind of unhealthy adoration and admiration where they're putting you on a pedestal. And I don't want that from people. All I wanted to do was share what I had to share and express myself as who I am.
yeah, by all means, we're
I never
average
wanted
people.
I
You know,
never
we're
I never want to be worshipped. I just want to connect. I want to know that something that I have endured in this life, God knows I've been through a lot of suffering, and I want to know that the wisdom I extracted from that can give somebody else in their time of despair some hope. And that's really why I showed up. It wasn't for people to think that I have all the answers or to worship me or to follow me. And when I start picking up on those energies, and it's happened multiple times on social media, I pull back because that's not why I ever showed up to begin with.
exactly, you know, and then this whole thing that people think, if I do exactly what this other person did, then I'll get the same result. But here's the thing: science works like that. When talking about the physical material, if you do the same physical material things, you execute them the same way, you mix the right ratios of chemicals, or you apply the right amount of current and potential to some system, you're going to get the same results, because that's the physical side of science. Then we have another side of science, which is the psychological, the metaphysical sides, which a lot of people don't want to consider as part of the science, because these things don't cohere to the very allegorical concept that everything must be a solid, clear, and cookie cutter profile. So what the advice here is that we're attempting to give is not to follow what we have done exactly, but to take from it this concept that there are ways for you to access something that goes beyond the human sentience and what we've been referring to as this cosmic consciousness that you can tap into. And so all of these lessons are not about following what we've done, but they're about you connecting with what you have access to exclusively. And it's going to be different for every single person that tries to access this stuff. It's just it's catered towards where you're at and where you need to go. It's based on your will and your perspective. So we just want to say, you know, we're not selling anything here. We're not trying to tell you, we have no programs, we have no books, we have no sales, we have nothing that's trying to put this out there. It's just, this is what we've experienced. And I know it's weird and it's very esoteric, but at the same time, I challenge you to try it, because you may find that it gives you that same connection that we've been able to establish. And if we're all completely crazy and we're all completely wrong, so be it. But don't judge it until you try it.
I don't know if this was a shout out to me or just a shout out to the liminal space, but Aaron said, always enjoy liminalisms. And I just want to say, I do too, wherever I find them. So, yeah, right there with you, brother.
No, we're so lucky to hear your story. And it's always the most powerful people that are like, listen, man, I don't want it. I don't want the following. I don't want the energy attached to that. I'm going to keep, trekking. Those are the ones with like the most gifts, and the most power. But I think for me, with the whole like me doing this workshop thing, I had nobody to turn to. Like there is certain initiations as you go in this experience that you're like initiated by some other field and spiritual like process. And for me, I'm like, well, I just really want to help people realize how powerful they are and tap into, it's not for everybody. And there's certain people that are going to need assistance, or of how to do that. And I am I'm here to remind you all of how powerful you are, and to have you believe that. And I want you to be living it and to know it and to walk like that and behave like that, because there is something about this place where we have amnesia, and there is some type of force or whatever reason that we battle these negative thoughts a lot, and so it's easy to feel horrific about ourselves or critical or down or whatever, and to buy into that. And it's for some reason we constantly are forgetting, how powerful we are, and what, this place is amazing, and we are lucky to be here.
There was
Absolutely.
there was
So
something
far
I
as I've seen, we seem to be born as humans with a deep level of intuition, and a highly accurate one at that. And it's almost like we are taught by society to unlearn this ability, to become more secular, to become more materialistic, and forget what we came born knowing.
Jeremiah, we were kind of
I often say the hardest thing is remembering who you are and what your eternal self is when you wake up every morning, every day, and being on your journey, your rightful journey.
and me and Jeremiah were talking about some topics that many people might be aware of, but they're uncomfortable to talk about. To be enlightened is to have the light burned into you, and that's going to the highest extent of joy, and the deepest extent of pain. And I sometimes talk about having been born with these archetypal impressions of death and destruction, and Jeremiah is like, you know what, we're all born with that. It's just we're not comfortable talking about it, or many people do everything they can to live their lives distracted from that. For people that are intimately aware with Alan Watts, he said in one of his lectures, um, you know, talking about this cycle of death and rebirth, and the power of atomic weapons, and how it might all come to an end, and people say, oh, what a shame. And Alan Watts is like, well, people say that they want to see the light. They want
Right.
to
In
see
the
the
in the
light.
terms of time of Freudian psychology, we also had a completely different perspective.
And
And
and and to see the light, to be enlightened, is both, it's encompassing everything, which means it's both joy and it's both pain at the same time, beyond human conception that only a few humans have really reached. And so, is it a shame if it all ends up with us burning up in light? I don't know,
right, it
because the
does. Yeah,
cycle.
yeah. When you're exposed to this intense cosmic light, if I wanted to use that term, which I know it's a terrible term and it sounds way too woo woo, but this whole idea that basically it burns into you, and it's a painful burn. It burns into you a different state of awareness, or psychological awareness, probably a better term. That you come out of this having some kind of sentient, conscious ability to recognize the trends. You'll see stuff happening from people all across the various social groups that you're in. So if you say play an online video game on your cell phone, and you're looking at groups that will occasionally talk and communicate when you become friends, these things will come in massive waves, and you'll see the entire communities across the board suddenly talking about the same types of things. And it'll be exactly within hours of when you've had these epiphanies. So these are some of the things that we recognize, that they take place across a huge variety of groups, and sometimes worldwide, which tells me it's not just a localized thing. It's not like a Birkeland current that comes down where you're at, but this would be more like something that the entire Earth passes through on the galactic eclipse.
Cosmic ways. It's interesting, like
Cosmic
what. Oh,
Sorry,
go
I
ahead,
just
Bernie.
wanted to say one of which is Happy Lunar New Year, aka Chinese New Year, over the last day, and that's another energy setting through, and the cycle of the ancients of through the moon.
Yeah, I'm gonna want you to pull this same chart up too, because Liminal was talking about how she had a very psychedelic type of experience while being sober with seeing several sigils. And what we're looking at here is a chart full of sigils, and I wanted her to look at that and see if any of these things are recognizable to her. So she's not quite there yet, but pull this up in probably 60 seconds.
One I have up right now, Solomon Sigil.
Yeah, that looks pretty good, because I'm just curious. I'm curious if she notices or recognizes any of these things as being even mildly familiar. To me, these don't look familiar to anything that I've seen. But I've seen many sigils. Much of them are more geometrically symmetrical
Okay,
and far
so
less complicated.
what I was looking at the other day, they didn't have circles around them. It was just the interior, and they were actually a lot more simple, kind of like what I'm looking at right now on the screen. They were a lot more simple like this. They weren't circled, and they didn't have a lot of crazy dots above or below them. They weren't quite as runic looking like this. They definitely had more roundedness to them, more alchemical. And yeah, they weren't circled, and they didn't have a lot of crazy dots incorporated to them. They weren't very Hebrew looking. They definitely had a very alchemical slash sigil look to them. It was like a combination of both.
Bernie, pull up the Enochian alphabet or the Enochian stuff.
Yeah, I haven't looked at that in like
I
over a
think
decade.
I have a picture of that coming up, so bear with me. I'm pretty
Yeah, they
sure
weren't
it's in this.
necessarily like the alchemical planetary looking symbols. They were much more complex, or they were much more elaborated alchemical symbols, including like the elements and other descriptions. But they looked slightly adapted as well. But I want to say they weren't overly complex, and they weren't circled as well. They were just like these they were like these scribblings that were done very neatly. And yep, so it didn't quite look like that, but I want to say it was somewhere between that and the alchemical symbolism that is familiar to many people that look beyond just like the planetary symbols.
So that's one of the ones that I've seen. I just showed that on the cam. And I've seen quite a few different ones. This one, when I seen it, I knew what it was. And this represented a coherent plasma double torus that had what we would call ejection jets, much like you would get from a black hole. And for me, when I seen that, I knew what to do with it. This was something that I could apply directly in the lab.
And this is like what Tesla and Einstein basically talked about, of was like zeroing into certain stars and basically gathering this data that way, of tapping into it with their mind and then retrieving all the data they needed. And then once they figured out how to connect to it,
This also looks a bit familiar too. Again, not dead on. It was an amalgam of like three different styles based on what I've seen brought up so far on the screen share. But it was wild, because as I was coming back from being in another dimension, there was like an hour or so that went on afterwards where I was having these closed eye visions of these alchemical sigil like symbols. And
Right. And to quote Tesla here, Nikola Tesla quotes, my brain is only but a receiver in the universe. There is a core from which we obtain knowledge, strength, and inspiration. Though I have not penetrated into the secrets of this core, I know that it exists.
I believe Walter Russell discussed that, about how he would go and lay down, and then he would anything he wanted to know, it would come to him. Like once you make that connection and once you get your mind, and I always say it's like getting your mind to like this theta brainwaves, like this like super receiving area. But then once you get it, you can go back to it. And the fact that she was able to come back to the same spot, and they spoke of that. They spoke of the ones that are able to bring back that data, or like they look at them as like saints or seers or
It was
sages, and that
it was like my dream earlier today. I was able to access this book that I was looking at sketches of plasmoids, but allegedly it was about what's going on inside of the body, you know? I was like, these are plasmoids I'm looking at. But it was allegedly a holistic book about healing the body. And I wish that I could draw from memory what I saw. All I can do is my best to explain to you that it looked very much like
well,
plasmoids.
with symbols and the sound, I think that was always like a healing alchemy, is the sound alchemy. And so
Right,
you have access to something that could, heal
like
many.
right, like seeing the alchemical sigil-like wall of scripture. Who knows what that would have been? Maybe it was protection or just letting me see the kind of thing that I had access to in order to help me. Yeah, that this looks very similar to
Yeah,
what I
go
was
back,
seeing.
Bernie, to that
Yeah.
Tesla coil drawing. I haven't seen that, and I'd like to take another look at that. So
And
just
yeah, the
go back
wild
to a
thing
couple of
about
images.
waking up from the dream was the
That's one right
subharmonics,
there.
the external sounds from outside my room coming through the
Cool.
materials of the building, and just
Thanks.
hearing these beautiful sounds reaching my ears the position I was inside the building. So that's happened a number of times, and I've just been noticing it more and more frequently. And oddly, for being around a lot of people, it was a very quiet afternoon. So
This looks a hell
very,
of a lot
very
like
odd.
the RK20 tubes that I'm familiar with now. We use 6L6, and we used Fiverr, like Fiverr U7s. We've used
It's
quite a few
all in
different
Russian, eh?
tubes. So. Well, Russia did make these tubes, so a lot of this stuff came straight out of there. Now, they stopped producing tubes for a number of years, and they're full in production once again. And now China is attempting to copy Russia's technology and also produce tubes in competition. But tube Tesla coils are very interesting because there's almost an infinite impedance in terms of the driving side, the high voltage side, versus the low impedance input for the primary coil, which is of course a primarily inductive load. So this is really, really interesting because the output of this is going to have an extremely high impedance, and so the potential that it can reach in the longitudinal mode transmissions, and what you can encode with this system, like thought or gravitational waves from the scalar side, they're going to be significantly higher efficacy. It's interesting that this
Well,
image
all
is in there
right.
at all.
That's
what I
that's
wanted to
just a
suggest to you.
random synchronicity for you, my friend. That's Bernie randomly saved this file for you, and
Well,
there it
Bernie does
is.
have some pretty darn good images, I'll tell you that.
Did you find
Right?
anything in Nokian? Let me know if you do. I wanted to see it.
There's just the angel letters so far, but it should be coming up soon. What is this in the translations in Russian? Darn it.
It looks very Mayan. Mayan sigils. Or capacitors.
I think it's more likely Scythian, potentially.
Yeah, there symbol 53 looks like the Feynman diagrams for energy transport between subatomic particles and photons interacting in
Say
vacuum
more.
space. Right there,
Yeah,
right there. You just right
Jeremiah,
over it.
if somebody told you right now, okay, photons are not real, Jeremiah, what would you tell them?
I would tell them that we can move over a pound of physical solid matter by using photon bombardment. And if they want to tell me that photons aren't real and they can explain how we can move a physical pound of heavy matter using nothing but light, I would ask them, if it's not photons and they're not real, what actually produces the force that moves the matter?
Thank you, Jeremiah. I'm going to have to bust that out.
Yeah, well, it's a good thing to bust because it's bullshit. Let's just be honest. People
Ooh.
that say that have no idea what's going on.
Okay, so a little
I'm sorry, I'm a bit
background.
judgmental on this.
Okay,
I'm not
you guys.
sorry.
I was on a show and I talk about photons and biophotons a lot. And there was people in the chat and people in the comments that were like really aggressive. Like they weren't just like, "Hey, like, photons aren't real." Like it was like all caps, like photons aren't real, you idiot. It was so aggressive. And I thought it was like they were joking. I didn't know that there's factions of people, like a bunch of them that literally don't believe
I'll
that
be honest.
photons are real.
When I got feedback, heavy pushback from the uneducated community that thought gravity didn't exist, this is something that literally is my job, to conquer gravity. So I can tell you 100% that gravity exists, but it is not a fourth force. Gravity is an electromagnetic field force. If you wanted to consider it, that it operates purely through the EM, the electric and the magnetic field vectors, and it has everything to do with the compression of space, time. And here we're talking about the variable refractive index. Those three words, variable refractive index, will explain to you what gravity is. It has to do with the space-time energy density, or basically how thick and heavy space is. And here's another thing that I have to state. In order to understand gravity, you must first comprehend that the vacuum of space has a weight. It has an angular momentum, and it has a physical mass. These things are facts. They have to do with proving the cosmological constant, the gravitational constant, the fine structure constant, the Planck length, and that scale, the Planck distance. These are, again, scientific facts. If you don't agree with them, I'm sorry, but they're useful. They apply in the lab. They actually work out when you do bench testing experiments. So if somebody doesn't believe that, I'm sorry, but you have to explain all the successful bench test experiments in whatever mechanism or modus operandi that you would believe instead. But simply trying to dismay something because you don't like it, that just doesn't work for science. It's not about opinion or feelings or sensations. This is about fact.
Yeah, that's like somebody saying like we're not dependent on quartzes for our technology.
Right. So for that stuff, for me, I just dismiss that outright because I've done the lab experiments and it's on my test bench, and I have working physical apparatus right now that can demonstrate these things as being factual truths. So I'm not going to listen to somebody's very biased opinion or their dismay. Too bad. Sorry, it doesn't agree with your opinions. But otherwise, I know a lot of you, most of you, in fact, most of you are open-minded. You can look at this stuff, and you're not going to make these judgments out of pure ignorance because they just simply don't jive with the idea that you would like more control over the world. So I appreciate most of you out there that are seeing this stuff and can look at the data and clearly identify that it's functional.
Hold on, what did I stumble upon here? Patagonian giants, a specific coordinates, and the existence of giants here is confirmed. Dr. Matthew May, Secretary of the British Royal Society, in a letter to the French Academy of Sciences in 1766. What?
I love that you had this in your files and you're discovering it
Right?
like it's like you probably have a bunch of treasures in there.
Oh, there's so many treasures in Bernie's hidden computer files. There's always more than enough material for an episode in every folder. Look at these gold. Huh.
Talking
The
about
HMS Dolphin.
talking about stuff from a long time ago. I heard someone drop the word witch. Old quote from olden times, like 350 years ago. A witch is a rebel in physics. Just want y'all to know that.
In a manner of speaking, so is a wizard.
Wizard, sorceress, however you want to put it, but dropping the word witch. I found this old quote from like the 1700s. A witch is a rebel in physics. And I was like, yeah, that's right, Julia. I was like, yeah. And it's like, you want to call it a witch or a wizard or a sorceress or what have you. I like to go with reality hacker. But yeah, rebel in physics.
What do you mean you don't subscribe to every single piece of academic dogma? How dare you challenge the status quo and the tenured physicists who are purely there to maintain their tenure? Oh, you dirty, dirty person to challenge them. A moment of silence,
Oh, of
apparently,
course,
after
it's
that.
involves the British Royal Society because there wasn't a bunch in a letter to the French Academy of Sciences because there wasn't a lot of flu-fla going on back and forth between those organizations.
We should have a Friday night show or a show where we bring up like certain like narratives, ancient narratives, and just like
with their
just
these and
clown on
thous.
it.
Sorry, I was
Their
just
with their
writing
these
the
and thous
coordinates
and their
down.
sirs that have been knighted, and they have to talk about what is and what isn't within their circles. I mean, when I see the British Royal Academy of Sciences, I'm just like, I don't know, guys. I'm just gonna have to take a minute, and then I'm gonna read it, and then I'm gonna take like a day, and then maybe I won't come back to it. Not to say
I don't.
nothing's ever
HMS
useful
Dolphin
ever come out of it. It's
by
just I've seen so many people get shut down through these things, these
But
organizations
at this
that have been
point,
around
the
for
one thing is though,
years.
if anything anywhere reported on giants, I almost believe automatically all of them because it's like finding any of that data has been so hidden and covered up. It's like
Oh, and
clearly
then
there was.
there's the outliers that try to break through the academia, and it's like there it is again. British Royal Academy of Sciences going denied, and then it's just like you're not welcome in that circle. If you were in it, you're ousted. If you're trying
Well,
to get
that's
in
what
it,
I'm saying.
you're
Let's
never
get
gonna
them
get
at
in
their
it.
own game. 400 years
Yep.
ago, 300 years ago, they were claiming that Charles Clerk testified that he had spent 2 hours watching the giants being examined and measured by Mr. Byron. He stated
Yes.
that none of the men were lower than 8 feet 2.5 meters. Some even exceeded 9 feet, and that the women were 7.5 to 8 feet tall. Interesting, no?
Why go to
Where
such great lengths to like
where
cover them up though, you
where
know?
did they see the giants? Are we talking about like
Patagonia, and the
like
coordinates that I have on
what
the
is this,
screen
like
right now.
the last refuge of the Nephilim or something? Like
Potentially.
Like even in the 40 at Catalina, I have like videos on it where they excavated it and um yeah, like there's so many giant bones found, but you hear a lot with these that these giants were just cannibals, right? And but from what I gathered, there was actually some really awesome ones, and there's even stories that they would guard portals or guard like there's like under water bases out by Catalina that you see them come in and out. Like there's all these stories and reports of USOs coming out from right around that area. So of these, you know, UFOs that are submerged underwater, and the different lights and different things, and that they come up. But so they spoke of that there was this race of giants that actually helped guard like that stuff and protect it. But you never really hear good things about giants. You normally hear that they were cannibals, they were nuts, and they were crazy.
Well, I'm not going to necessarily agree with you on the idea that giants were anything less than violent and corrupt, but that's just my personal opinion, and I'm not going to attempt to back that. What I will say, though, is take, for example, the scientist Eric Lathwaite. Very, very prolific career. Many demonstrations at the Royal Institute. Eric Lathwaite attempted to talk about the idea that gyroscopic precession would cause a gravitational effect where the amount of energy it took to lift some physical mass was significantly less than would be calculated. And so this would have to do with your moment of inertia and your direct effect in the gravitational field. So if we look at the Mach effect, the Mach effect predicts that the difference in velocity in relative velocity from a precessing gyroscopic source like a flywheel would cause a lifting force or a change in its gravitational coupling coefficient directly due to what we recognize now as a what's the word for that? We have a relativistic component that comes from our general relativity, and it operates through the Lorentz transform. But he was blasted hardcore by the Real Institute, and he lost his tenure and was kicked out of the college. So he was very, very heavily beaten down by this. But nevertheless, the Mach effect seems to be quite well supported. And if we take a look at James Woodward and his idea of the Mach effect thruster, which is a piezoelectric oscillating transducer system which can generate a unidirectional force, this was funded by NASA with quite a bit of financial backing behind it, and it's still going on over 20 years. And so that's something that's supported by the scientific data, and it seems to be pretty solid. But yet Lathwaite was slammed. So this is a problem for me. And
I would like to bring your attention to what is written on the bottom right of this chart. And this chart is the Rosicrucian order, the solar spectrum, and the cosmic vibrations, carefully compiled by the editorial and research departments of Amherst College after consulting scientific laboratories, and then also reports from the Rosicrucian laboratories of foreign countries. And at the very bottom here, we have what says psychic blue, and then after that crosses into spirit electrons.
Ooh. Ooh. Bernie. I love it. I need a picture of that, Bernie. That's Bernie Gold right there.
Yeah.
Right below ultraviolet, then psychic blue and spirit electrons are red-blue shift, like I've been saying, in between the red going one way, what seems to be demon, and blue ultraviolet into the aura, and yeah, seems to be spirit electrons.
Yeah,
It's
that's
measuring
really
the vibrational octaves of these different ranges of light and sound.
That's what I wanted to say. Is there was blonde-haired, blue-eyed giants like found at Catalina, and they were saying they were like kind of like guardians or whatever.
Soul Essence Psychic Productions. Wow.
And you start to think of like, why would they try to block the sun too?
And cosmic rays. Gamma
Like,
and
there's-
cosmic rays are equivalent to psychic
And they're talking
production and soul essence, according to
They're talking about
this.
vibrations and octaves as well. Interesting.
It just makes me think too of like the weather modification of things that like block out the sun. You know, I just kept feeling like there's things that are absorbed like from the sun that affect our DNA that I can't prove. I have no proof of that. I just feel like it does. Cosmic rays, sun rays.
Well, cosmic rays, that's one of the things that we talked about early on in the show for people who might not have been here in the beginning. That we've got the Geiger probe, and we're picking up CMEs, which are basically cosmic rays. And when they hit, they generally when they hit the upper atmosphere, Bremsstrahlung radiation, which is one of the things that operates in the X-ray band, and most of that gets dissipated and it doesn't come in too strong. But we also have high energy gammas that make their way all the way through the upper ionosphere down to our detectors, and so we pick up CMEs or cosmic ray or CME. Geez, I can't remember the term now. Well, screw me. Anyways, coronal mass ejections. That's it. And so we pick those things up. They'll give you a little burst for about maybe a quarter of a second. You'll get about 1,000 times the count rate that you would normally get. And that number has been way the hell up over the course of the last 6 months.
And you've noticed a difference. Have you guys ever looked into the oh my god particle or the Amaterasu particle?
Only briefly, but not enough to support it.
So you don't really believe it, like believe that they,
It's
because
not a
of
matter
like
of
how
belief.
would they
It's just
measure
simply I'm
it?
not educated. It's not a matter of belief. It could be true.
Well, it's just interesting that it's interesting how that's pieced together, but they have no idea what it is. And they're saying like it would be like they're basically like guessing like that it was like in a nearby like Centaurus A. Like they're basically saying like it's at the center of the galaxy or like supermassive black holes. And the thing is they measured the Amaterasu one like at the end of May of 2021. And they measured it in Utah. And it wasn't as like it wasn't it was similar to the oh my god particle. So I want to call this one, the Amaterasu one, the oh my goddess particle. So cheesy.
I know, I like it. I don't know. That was the right kind of cheese for me.
I love it. We need
Yeah,
balance.
Yeah.
I can't deny the
No, I like
permanent
it.
energy in all this. You know, we are very much in this modern financial corrupt system into a masculine energy type of system. But we used to have a very different system in the ancient Kemet, and this was a very feminine energy. So I do take significant.
That's what I love about what Han says all the time. He's like, there was no male pharaohs. He's like, no. Like when he, huh?
Sorry, I just wanted to say Hans. It's fun to say.
Hans.
Sorry, don't mind me.
I love Hans.
Hans.
We love you, Hans.
Hans. You know, in Die Hard when he says Hans booby.
Yeah. Oh my god. I did just want to give a shout out to Esoteric Gold. I don't know if he's still floating around, but I've been floating around your content for over a year now, and it seems like in the last number of months you've been definitely coming into a lot more information, and just wanted to give a shout out to you and the work you're trying to put out there. And I don't know if it's appropriate or if you want to hop on and say a few things regarding where material science meets up with alchemy. But
Well, I will mention this about Esoteric Gold. He sent
yeah.
us now several samples, and we now have some pretty high purity colloidal gold. We have carbon injected colloidal gold with his process, and Esoteric is one of the very few people who, in my opinion at least, have followed the classic alchemical traditions. He's got a full furnace, so he's using the high temperature systems. He's not using low energy electrolytics. He's using full furnace, and he's also operated under mercury combinations with gold. And he's been able to produce some pretty fantastic materials that we've tested in the microwave, we've tested in the high voltage, and that goes in concert with Daniel Foster's information, where he's also sent down massive samples. And you personally, Liminal, you've seen what Mr. Foster's materials have done when you just add a little bit of high concentrated H2O2 and a bit of citric acid.
Esoteric is like, are you sure you want to put that much in your cup? And I'm like, yup, because allegedly Foster just downed a hell of a lot more. So all I can tell you is like I had amazing energy from it, and I was a-okay just fine. And this is not something that I would just arbitrarily recommend to someone, you really need to trust your source and what it is you're doing. And this is in no way a promotion to do anything whatsoever. It's in no way an encouragement. It's just me recounting an experience I've had a number of times, and everyone else can poo-poo on the purple gold that looks like wine turning into water, which both me and Exotic have demonstrated on Birdie's channel before. Um, make of it what you will, but when you have the real deal, the experiences will amaze you. Again, not an encouragement or a promotion.
Wait,
Just
did you
Right,
take any of
Birdie's
this
got the
before
purple
your
bottle right there.
multi-dimensional
He just pulls it
experience?
up like
oh
it's
hell no,
nothing.
no, I didn't.
Okay.
This
He's
all
got
this
the
all
green
just
and purple.
happened. It just happened,
Mm.
girl. It just happened, girl. There's none of that involved. It's been months and months since I've taken it. Every so often, like two to three times a year, I'll just try it out just to see what's up. But nope, that weird interdimensional experience it just happened. It
Oh
was
my God, I
nuts.
love that happened organically because a
Yeah,
lot
it
of people, I'm
happened.
like, listen, I was always aggressively guided. You're never allowed to take hallucinogenics and whatever. I produce higher amounts of DMT naturally, but to be that example of showing people you don't have to take DMT or ayahuasca, that there is a way to have these spiritual experiences organically. So the fact that you are like that is your testimonial. That is
I mean, I will
so
testify.
awesome.
I will testify to you can trip on DMT organically. Your brain produces it, and in certain stressed brain states, it's going to release more DMT because it thinks you might be dying or going through something traumatic on a physiological level, and it will release more DMT. So you can induce DMT tripping without dosing yourself externally with DMT. Not going to advise people how to make that happen because this is not an advice show. I'm just speaking from personal experience. That is a thing, and many other people will attest to that. So you'll have to do your own research and use your best judgment. But yes, that's definitely something that happens when you're dreaming, and certainly when you're awake during stressed brain states. Um, and there are other avenues as well that don't just rely on the DMT. There are other chemicals in the body that merge and mix to create these different states. And I don't mean to sound like I'm getting woo again, but as your consciousness grows and you kind of go into this next phase of awareness, weird weirder and weirder, curiouser and curiouser.
Well, let me
You
back
know,
your
you
esoteric
know.
perspective here with some scientific fact. Dimethyltryptamine is something that exists in the human brain. It's primarily produced in the pineal gland, but we also note that every single plant on Earth naturally produces, by some extent, a small percentage, or in some cases, as much as 2% of dimethyltryptamine, which is a naturally occurring chemical. Now, we do not have yet to this day in 2024 an explanation for why plants utilize this chemical, why they produce it, or what its exact purpose is. But we know what it does when we ingest it, and we know what it does when we are in the dream state, and how it's utilized in our superconscious connection, especially during dreaming where we have very, very vivid experiences. So these things are scientifically known as well, and we've been able to test them because we can artificially supplement the natural neurosynapse production, especially, like we said, in the very center of the brain, in the pineal gland where this stuff is produced. So the fact that it exists at all, and that it persists in fairly large quantities, well enough to measure, I think should tell us that this is a useful chemical, and we can basically produce the stuff as needed.
And yeah, I mean, Graham Hancock talks about in his presentation a lot of like, look, they showed the acacia tree and they showed this and that, but I don't necessarily think that was like the ancient way. It was just through the acacia tree. I think they knew how to produce more DMT naturally, and I think gold was a huge part of that.
Well, the gold certainly helps catalyze this process. The fact that literally every single plant on Earth will produce some percentage of this, and some are much more prolific than others, should tell us that this is somehow naturally useful. And even though we may not have the full explanation yet scientifically, we cannot deny that these things, these chemical compounds, are present. And so what is the purpose?
From what I understand, there was like this ancient formula that was like certain metals and certain other things that were in it and mixed together. And once you take it, anything you've ever wanted to know, it's like you so euphoric, like it's unbelievable. Anything, think of the best feeling. Cause like when I view things, like I'll experience like what the people are experiencing. And it's why it's like so intense. But
it's like a super empathy, right?
Like what if scandalous things are going on or nefarious things are going, that's why it's like I want to leave, like I don't want to experience that, but I'll feel what they're feeling. So watching this, all these groups of men and women and of all ages, because I was like, what's a little kid doing down there with it, and like a grandparent, and they're all gathering around, they're holding hands, but they're in this cave and they ingested this formula, and like basically it's like think of anything. You think of every great feeling in the world, right? All the pleasure, like your favorite food, your favorite moment, like all your favorite. And now amplify that, every great feeling in the world, and then multiply that, and then then on steroids, like, and it's that, and then on top of that, it's so euphoric, and then on top of that, it's anything you've ever wanted to know, like like spiritually where you're at, like and you feel it.
And you gave this perfect analogy of the cave. And in terms of Plato's cave, I believe that the dimethyltryptamine is the solution to reconciling one's own limited perspective, locked in their own mind, of the Plato's cave analogy, where instead of looking at the shadows, this allows you to see beyond the shadows, even if you're not facing towards the direction where these real physical objects are casting the shadows. It allows you to see beyond where you're looking. It is a super conscious state, and it's very much like astral projection, where you get to see beyond what your eyes are looking at. This is not a optical thing.
It goes beyond the physical, sensory, visual system. And a little bit of an offshoot there, talking about Plato's cave, it just came to mind. I thought it was so clever when I made the analogy that particle physics is akin to Plato's cave. I was like, that's pretty damn good, because you're just chasing the trails, right? You're doing your best to map where the particles have gone. And then I was like, I can't be the only person that has said this. And I looked it up, and it turns out a bunch of physicists before me have been making this analogy about how Plato's cave is like particle physics. And I'm like, yep, like I'm just tapping into the same idea that these smart ass physicists are tapping into. So yeah, if you ever think that you've come up with something clever, maybe search it, maybe don't. Maybe be surprised that you were the only person that said it, or maybe be humbled that you weren't, and maybe feel like a little camaraderie knowing that there's other people out there maybe smarter than you in other ways that were like right there with you.
That's why they say when you get an idea, you better act upon it, because that whether it's a lyric or an art or a business idea or insight, like, because it will go back into the field and someone else can take it.
Exactly. It's hard to say like your idea was original, right? Because there's people out there that are definitely snooping and trying to copy and get onto the next big thing.
And they're and then to support what you're saying there, I felt very proud of myself when I came up with what I call the 2-coil system.
Right.
And it was something that came out of my mind after I was able to reconcile quantum physics with general relativity. And there was an output from that system that showed us we could use electromagnetic stress potentials in the aether, as I like to call it, but most would call it simply the vacuum refractive index in the classic physics. we could generate forces directly out of the vacuum that were non-physical, did not comply with Newton's basic principles of motion, and did not comply with conservation of energy or conservation of momentum due to the fact that they are limited by the definition that they must be enclosed systems. And all of these were open systems. And, beyond those points, we see that these things are highly applicable, that you can directly utilize these effects in the lab with very little energy, and that the physics we have today, the equations that we have today, are flawed.
That's what you guys are here for.
Right. We have to realize that we're all interconnected. Like, no man is an island from other humans. No man or woman, and no human is an island from the rest of the universe. We're all part of a complex interacting system. And when you have an idea, when you have a thought, when you come up with a theory, it's likely that there's other people organically, not in a way where they're spying on you, are coming up with something very similar, because you're all tuned in to the same thing. And that's why you see a number of people spontaneously within a short period of time come up with the same ideas. And you know, if you're just out there to get the information out there, it's not a big idea. If you're out with dollar signs in your eyes, there's a lot of drama and issues that can come from that.
Right. And to
So
finish that point, though, that I brought up, I found out that after I was very proud of myself and told everybody that I knew about that, especially the builders and the scientists, I found 12 other people who had invented this stuff going all the way back to like 1890.
Mm.
And so I did not come up with this. Apparently, I was just, I realized what was going on, and I came up with a solution, but it was the same exact solution that 12 other people had come up with before me. And I'm like, wow, you know what? I guess I'm just one of a great many. And
That's right.
I'm so humbled by how many people had previously found this, and the fact that it doesn't exist in our physics today, that it's a completely denied prospect, and nobody seems to want to acknowledge this, especially in the academic community. That was enough for me to realize we had stumbled onto something really fantastic here, that we could generate field forces directly out of the vacuum, that they did not require physical interactions. These were non-basic kinetic interactions. So what I'm saying here is we can use fields, and only fields with no physical material coupling, to produce direct non-Newtonian forces directly out of the aether. So we're talking propulsion with no reaction.
From the mind, essentially. Is that what you're saying?
It's not
You
of the
can
mind.
consciously
It's
create?
just that we can produce a field in the vacuum space and pull against it, but it does not require the physical existence of expelled matter. So no rockets,
Okay.
no propellant, no physical thing that's actually being exited from your system, just nothing but electrodynamic fields will produce a propulsive force to move you forward through the vacuum of space. And the great thing about that is there's no maximum velocity, meaning that you can reach luminal speeds and beyond, because again, there's no physical matter that actually has to go faster than light. These are fields, and fields do not comply with the limitations of the velocity of light, especially when you're talking about longitudinal mode transmission.
Ooh, we're talking scalar wave, longitudinal waves. What?
Boom! She's got it. It's exactly
Scalar waves.
that.
And that's what's so interesting is the scalar waves. It's like it penetrates even through a Faraday cage. And the scalar waves at the Bosnian pyramid, and it's almost like it comes up from the earth and can penetrate everything. Like unbelievable. But they're longitudinal waves, and aren't they known as like the Tesla waves too?
That's exactly what they are. They do not comply with the basic Heaviside Gibbs adaptation of Maxwell's quaternions.
It's like 0-point energy, right?
In a manner of speaking, it is, because the 0-point energy refers to the cosmic lattice background energy. This would be recognizable by the fact that the cosmic lattice has a huge amount of motion in it, And so we call that the cosmic microwave background. What it really refers to is that the physical vacuum is made of stuff. It does not exist in a void. It has physical mass, it has angular momentum, and it has inertia. These things are undeniable necessities in order for light to be transmitted from point A to point B, in order for electrical charge to be transmitted in any kind of scalar potential electrostatically between two charged objects. They must be, and they are, necessities for these field forces to exist. And to deny them would be pure ignorance.
And sound waves are longitudinal, right? Too.
Sound waves are indeed longitudinal, but
so scalar waves longitudinal, sound waves longitudinal.
Well,
you guys.
The concept of scalar before it has a vector, it emanates in all vectors, 360 in all directions. And when people usually talk about a scalar wave, that means that it has a vector, it's going in a particular direction. To say just scalar, that's conceptual, and as far as I know, doesn't actually exist. It's just conceptual, and it goes in all directions, emanating in all directions. When people are talking about it being in a wave, then it has a vector. It's moving, and it has a certain amplitude, a certain amplitude, a certain speed, moving in a certain direction.
It comes from the earth, or like it comes from inside the earth, or they're not necessarily sure.
It can happen conceptually. Scalar can happen anywhere. It's this point in local space-time coordinate where the energy is emitting in all directions, all vectors.
And for you, Julia, the scalar transmission happens in your mind as well. Your neurosynapse connections, your neurosynapse firings inside your brain and throughout the rest of your body produce scalar longitudinal transmissions which penetrate, meaning that this telepathic connection that you may have experienced is actually a visceral thing which can be detected by equipment.
Well, I think that's where, like, from what I understand, like, it was really directing me towards the cerebral spinal fluid, because the cerebral spinal fluid stores light. It's constantly transmitting vibration and light. It's piezoelectric. The energetic fluid that it creates can reach every major center part of the brain and the entire, like, your entire central nervous system, instantaneously and non-synaptically, like through thought process. So it creates like spontaneous states of being, states of consciousness that are not through mental thought, but through a wisdom of light that is conducted by water. And the CSF fluid is one molecule different than seawater. And it's like that's why I pay attention to the moon too. Is like clearly the moon is able to affect the tides, the oceans, and the oceans are mainly saltwater, and our bodies are mainly made of what? So it's going to affect us and everything.
I would agree with everything you said except for 2 points. One, it's not water. It operates outside of the water regime, although water helps a lot. And secondly, it's not limited to a certain construct of stimulus, but these things are direct electromotive signals that are produced by these biophoton emitters. So if we look at what produces a biophoton, we're looking at a compound double spiral self-canceling coil that produces a magnetic field which is compressed in that physical space, because we have a north and a south pole in most of our bipolar membrane outputs. But in this case, we have a monopolar output where two poles get compressed into the center of a biophoton because the two coils are canceling. And these happen because we have an actual spiral lattice of perhaps around 28 turns or less in each individual synapse connection that's responsible for the nervous system. And when they do cancel, they produce a temporal compression, which means that time itself flows differently in those regions. And so now it's been recently proven, this is a brand new piece of information as of the last 2 years, that the brain operates at superluminal velocities in transmitting these signals. And what that means is that the energy density of these superluminal signals is significantly higher, so that they can penetrate barriers directly through the skull, through the tissue of the brain, and through the fat cells into an external transmitted signal that can couple with other human minds And
And
that is a
it's
mind
not
fuck on its own, that
it's
you can
not just the
transmit a
mind.
signal in your
It's
own mind
it's
that
the
reaches other human
it's the
minds.
intelligence and the consciousness of the body as well, because the mind is connected, the brain is connected to the nervous system. You can't have the brain without the nervous system. So the mind body connection comes through with the nervous system. You can't have one without the other. The mind and the body are connected through that, and the cerebral spinal fluid. So there's their intelligence throughout the whole body.
I believe it was the guy who did who invented the polarity therapy, Randolph Stone. He said the soul resides in the cerebral spinal fluid, and apparently a lot of like wise people in different cultures would say that, but they would call it the Amrita. But it's, flowing through us, you guys. All the answers are inside of you. It's just about accessing it and tapping into that as well.
Yep,
Right.
there is so much information out there about
But
mind body states.
the whole like chrism thing though too, of like, because for me I was like, wait, is there a difference with the chrism and the cerebral spinal fluid? Because that whole process of the chrism, going up like from the sacral plexus, the sacred place where the five vertebrae meet at the spine, and then it goes up the 33 vertebrae, and then when it meets the pituitary and the pineal, after spending 3 days in the hypothalamus, it creates the circuit causing secretion, which is the DMT, which is known as the honey, and the serotonin. So when the seed oil is preserved and returned to reach the promised land and become the perfect antenna for prayer. So they say that when the moon enters your star sign, like your brain creates the chrism as it begins its journey up through the nervous system until it reaches your sacred plexus. And then, it's a good time where you must overcome your five senses. And that was like kind of like a known thing in the ancient times, where they would abstain from like doing certain things or drinking or indulging, and and return it to your like pituitary, your pineal. So yeah, like it's your body producing DMT and going that being the gateway to this divine realm. And so for me, I was like, wait, is there the chrism? What's the difference between the chrism and the cerebral spinal fluid? But yeah, that also has a lot to do with like the production of of your melatonin. Did I lose you guys?
Sorry.
No, not
No,
not
well,
at all. That melatonin to serotonin cycle is extremely important, and is not to be disregarded. That's why sleep is so fundamental. If you do not restore and recover, you cannot regain that serotonin. And if your sleep is all messed up, then the melatonin serotonin cycle is messed up, and you're not getting a good balance of both. So.
And so many people are deficient in like magnesium,
Oh,
right?
magnesium is a supplement that basically every human needs. Magnesium is responsible or plays a role in over 400 bodily functions. So if that doesn't indicate to you the importance of magnesium, I'm telling it to you right now. It is one of the most important minerals. And I'm not telling you if there is just one to take that one, but I'm telling you it plays a big role in so many functions of the mind and body that you need to take it. It is yeah, as someone said, it is key to
And with
supplement with.
depression too. Like if you're like really deficient in magnesium, you'll get bummed, like
Right.
emotionally.
Not only that, but again, we're just speaking from our own experience. No medical advice here, but D3 as well. That's been known to help with so many things, not just to get rid of a cold, but just speaking about what has been known and from our personal experience. Again, not a promotion or advertisement. Please do your own research. Please consult with your own doctors. before proceeding. Do what is right for you. We're just sharing what we know from our own experience.
I need to memorize that because
And
I just come on here and just blast things off where I need to like catch my. I get on such
I
strong ones.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's this whole,
gotta
you know,
rewatch what you
disclaimer. There's a whole disclaimer for everyone to see constantly at the bottom of Bernie's stream, but it's always good to verbalize that because it's, you
no
know, the
health advice, no legal
right,
advice, no
yeah, no
financial
financial
advice,
advice
and
for
don't
investment. Yeah, it's
don't try any experiments at home. Don't
right. I mean, we can't
argue with
stop
the
people. We can't.
government.
Right. I mean,
I
everybody's free to
except
do
for
what they want to
Paul.
do. We just need to make sure that, you know, we're just speaking from our own experience and it's not an advertisement in any way or an encouragement in any way whatsoever. It's good to verbalize that because things are listening and they need to hear that we're not encouraging anything.
I just can't get over this Rosicrucian order. Psychic blue and spirit electrons coming back in at the X-ray level are going into gamma and cosmic ray. With like and the octaves of how many times per second and starting at touch with, one, then going to sound octaves and your electromagnetic and up we go into heat and infrared, the visual lights, and that they claim we have the essence, these soul essence occur in octaves considerably beyond that of any known material manifestations.
Right, just to mention the commas here, those aren't commas of isolated frequencies, especially like what we're looking at there in the X-ray. It's not those individual numbers separated by commas, but the commas are indicating the full numbers. So these are in the terahertz range. They are not individual lower frequencies into the triple digits, but these are total compound numbers. So we're talking many trillions of cycles per second. Just if anybody's looking at the chart does not clarify this, but it's
I
important to
think it
understand
goes
these are
into
terahertz frequencies.
quadrillions even. Seven sets of three, whatever the heck that is. My God. Well, maybe that is my God. That's the essence of the soul, the spirit particle.
Terahertz is a really interesting thing because, well, Jeremy Riss on Alien Scientist channel has pointed this out for over 12 years, that we have something called the terahertz band gap, meaning that in our technological equipment, for our ability to produce different electromagnetic spectral wavelengths of transmission, that we have major limits producing things that operate in the terahertz waveband because our equipment simply isn't fast enough. Our semiconductors can't switch quick enough. Think about it this way. Your computer, if you have a very, very good one, you may be operating at 4 gigahertz or 4 gigacycles per second, 4 billion cycles per second or above. These are in trillions of cycles per second. They operate in the visible wavelength, and their ability to directly interface, especially when you consider the compressed space-time of the human brain and the neurosynapse firings, operate in many cases on these same frequencies. So here's the thing. You modify space-time when you get this kind of extremely high frequency output because the energy density thereof can compress that physical space. And this means the efficacy of thought, the density of your own thoughts, of your own mind, of your own willpower has such a high compression, it can physically affect matter in this real world. And if you wanted to talk about manifestation, if we dare delve into that category, these are things that we can do as human beings.
That kind of gets into the biophotons, right? Like if DNA is emitting biophotons, and that's amazing. What does Jeremy say about the technology at that? What does he say?
Simple. We can use charged particle acceleration to produce these kinds of wavelengths, and particularly in cyclotron rotations, this is something that's easy to produce in the Bremsstrahlung radiation spectrum. So let me just explain what Bremsstrahlung radiation is for people who don't know. If you take an electron and you push it out of some emitter very, very quickly, it will simply be traveling fast. But if you pass that same electron that's traveling very fast through a strong magnetic field, instead of going in a straight path, it'll produce little circles. And each little circular rotation will produce a photon. These photons are the terahertz wavelength. Our brains have the ability to produce these same high-frequency photons. This is
You said in a circular? You said when it's spun? Wait, Jeremiah, when it's spun?
Yeah, that's correct. The photon will take a little cyclic rotation by cyclotron radiation, and it produces Bremsstrahlung outputs. And the Bremsstrahlung radiation is a German term. Bremsstrahlung means breaking radiation, which is a slowing down of the linear path of an electron. Now, technically, the electron doesn't slow down. It moves exactly at the same speed, but instead of taking a straight path, it produces a circular path. And in that circular output, at the edge, it produces a photon in the terahertz. And these photons have enough energy to affect physical matter and interface directly with the material world.
You just
Oh my dude, Jeremiah. I'm like, oh my gosh, I love that is recorded so where I could come back to that. But you know what I found interesting is I don't know if you've heard this before, but Samuel Cohen, he said red mercury is manufactured by mixing special nuclear materials in very small amounts into the ordinary compound and then inserting the mixture into a nuclear reactor or bombarding it with a particle accelerator beam.
That is correct.
I made a meme of that like 5 years ago.
Yes, it turns out that there are in every bit of matter, whether or not you pick copper or barium or any other physical element, there is a certain percentage, even in lead, a certain percentage of what we call odd nucleon isotopes, which means that they don't have the balanced number of uncharged particles versus charged particles. So in the nucleus of an atom, you have neutrons and protons. Now, generally, most materials should have a balanced number of neutrons and protons. So say for hydrogen, you're not going to have any neutrons, you're going to have just one proton, and you're going to have an electron. Hydrogen is a nuclear isotope because it doesn't have a balanced number of neutrons. But if you go into things like copper, you're going to have mostly balanced neutron-proton ratio. But some percentage will have an extra number of neutrons. And this produces what we call a gravitational or inertial isotope. If it has too many neutrons, it's a gravitational isotope. If it doesn't have enough neutrons, it's called an inertial isotope. And these things do not respond linearly to an acceleration force, meaning they are anti-gravitational. That means levitation. And it turns out that colloidal gold, monoatomics, and especially in Bernie's case, the things that he's trying to produce, he's attempting to isolate these things through electromotive force by stimulating the catalytic breakdown of different elements by providing power in an electrolytic solution in order to produce powders and highly reactive elements. These things can allow us to fly.
So basically, you're saying the legends of the ancients and this demigod Ormus technology is all true.
It's not all true, but there is very factual information within the misguided semi-truths.
Yeah, I should never say all true.
Jeez. Work with them.
Getting a little carried away there. Majority.
The majority, I would agree. It is the majority. It's not just a tiny percentage, but it is actually the majority of these things that work. Look at Thomas Townsend Brown's work, and I want to recommend that people go on Rex Research Read Thomas Townsend Brown's Notebooks 1, 2, and 4. Notebook number 3 is missing, but I want to mention that the missing notebook number 3 is now officially been partially transcribed on the Thomas Townsend Brown official family website.
Mm-hmm. Do you know that website? Do you know the name of it?
I should really try to find that and post it in the private chat so that Bernie can add that to the general chat. I'll tell you what, I'll do that right now and mute myself out while you guys talk.
I was just
I
trying to
got
pull up.
desperately hungry, so I was just chewing on some pretzels. Sorry.
I turned my camera off because I went to town on some popcorn. Garlic Parmesan popcorn.
Yum.
And it's getting a little bit late that I'm going to have to run soon. And we are 2.5 hours in almost. But I was pulling up the Rex Research website here, trying to find the index of Tetons Brown we were talking about. Correct, Jeremiah? Oh, he was muted. Well, any last topics to discuss, or
Just that it was really remarkable to come together with all of you tonight. I don't know if there's anyone that has anything they want to say in the after show. If you got to go, Bernie, but it was really great to be able to get on here and start sharing some of these ideas that we're formulating from the experiences that have been culminating over the last week.
yeah? And do you want me to open it up, post the link in the live chat, and have a after show for you guys?
Yeah, I think we could do that for a little bit tonight. I don't know how long.
Yeah, after party.
Yeah, but we could after party a little bit.
I never really after party. Very few times have I after partied with you guys. Actually, no. Every time I did, it was pretty legendary. So yeah, I'm excited.
The legendary stuff happens before and after the show. So sorry, guys. We try to do our best to put out what we can during the show, but some things just can't be said. So
there's so many times I want to say it too, and I'll be like, I'll just say something that like completely different, and it doesn't read well.
Okay, trying to copy and paste something. All of a sudden, my fingers don't work. Everybody go subscribe to Julia Kamin, Liminal, and of course Exotic Propulsion. And feel free to click the link to join the after show.
Are you gonna post it?
I am doing so right now.
Yep. And
oh wait, I should probably put it in my chat too.
I apologize that I still don't have anything up on YouTube. I have a lot of light art I really need to upload. It's just I have so much going on. Yes, I have so much going on right now, but I am gonna start to get something up in 2024. Something up.
Right? It's coming, and it will be epic.
It's coming. It'll come when it's supposed to.
Okay, I posted it in my chat. You guys hop in if you want to chat with us. The after party.
With the after show. And on that note, we'll see you there.